All right, so coming into a seated position and just taking the less favored crossing of your legs, and just spend a little time adjusting the flesh kind of diagonally from underneath the sitting bones back towards the hips. Place yourself in a way you feel balanced from left to right. And then take some time to find the alignment of the spine, the lightness of the spine. And as you find that lightness, keep track of the legs remaining heavy and grounded, supporting this seated pose that really gives our spine some energy, starts to bring a certain brightness to the brain. And as you feel ready, joining the hands in front of the heart, closing the eyes and lowering the gaze toward your heart. Tuning your attention into your breathing. Just becoming a passive witness to the breath. Maybe noticing how the posture you're in is supporting a deeper version of your breath, maybe more spaciousness for the breath, maybe an ease to the breathing. Witnessing any movement in your body that's created or caused by the breath. See if you can tell how high the breath climbs. Does it reach the chest? And as you feel ready, bowing toward your heart. Let your hands move down. Raise your head. Allow your eyes to come open. And welcome. So today's a restorative practice. And we're going to begin in a head-supported downward facing dog. And you can use anything really to support your head, but I like to use a block, which gives me kind of a more firm feeling of support. And the best position is kind of lining the block up where your elbow creases are, so that when you come into downward dog, usually it's the right placement for your head. So as you're ready, curl your toes underneath and extend your legs. And if the head doesn't meet the block or whatever prop you're using, you can adjust, of course, and raise or lower the height. What we don't want to do is bend the elbows to meet the prop. So make sure your arms are fully extended. And because we're doing a restorative version, we're going to be holding it longer. So if you need to come out down into child's pose intermittently, feel free to do that. If you want to begin to pump the legs, to wake the legs up, really make this practice your own. And that's true of any practice, not just restorative. We should always be in relationship with ourselves in this practice, not just following instructions, but really tuned in to what our bodies need. You can also play with shifting the weight of your hands into the opposite side hip. So say the right hand is heavy, drawing up the left side hip. And after some time, you might notice you need to adjust the height of the head support. So make sure it's still matching your needs. As we hold poses, we can graduate out of the original setup. We'll just continue to observe yourself in the pose and make those adjustments as you need. We'll be here another minute, so like I said, if you need to come into Adho Mukha Virasana, child's pose, feel free to do that. Yesterday, I took Jill's class, and I had not slept very well the night before. And so I ended up doing probably a quarter of what she actually taught and really serving myself for the remainder of the class in some poses I just didn't come out of. So just listening to what you need today, this morning. So now we're all going to come down, if you're not already there, into child's pose. And sit back as far as you can, sitting bones toward the heels, the head supported. And now we're going to transition to Salamba Uttanasana. Salamba is the word for supported. Uttanasana, standing forward bend. So make your way to standing, and you're going to do a two-block setup. And there's, many configurations of blocks that you can use to get the height you need. I know what mine usually is kind of this T-shaped setup, but we're attempting to get the top of the head in support. You can also, if you're close, you can add a blanket to kind of adjust the height up slightly if you need. So we want to start in a wide stance. Toes in front of heels, and just make your way down so that the top of the head is supported and the legs are extended. And if the blocks don't work for you, you can always use a chair seat and use your arms to rest the forehead rather than the top of the head. So there's always modified positions you can find if this is too extreme. What we don't want in any practice, but especially not in restorative yoga, is to be agitated or kind of overdoing. So we tend to pool weight in our heels here. So be conscious of transitioning your weight toward your toes and really keeping your legs as straight as you can. Finding passive arms. Sometimes I like to rest the backs of my hands on the floor. And again, if you hold the pose long enough, you might notice you need to drop down the height. So listen to that, pay attention to that. As you shift weight into your toes, try not to cling with your toes. So see if you can keep the toes relaxed and the toe bases broad. Just spending a few more breaths here. Counting off 4 more breaths for yourself. And you're going to bring yourself up slowly by bending your knees, looking forward, and coming all the way up. So we're starting this practice off in a series of forward bends, and we're going to come into the third one before we move on out of forward bends, which will be Prasarita Padottanasana. Prasarita means spread, Pada is foot, and the rest of it is forward bend pose. So separate your feet. Because we're closer to the ground with the feet wide, you might not need as much height for your head. But we are going to attempt to get the head down, and same thing goes here. If you want a modified version, the chair in front of you for the forehead can be a nice intermediate place. So again, you're going to come down, place your head, and attempt to keep your hips on the same plane as your ankles. And just like Uttanasana, shifting weight forward because our weight tends to shift back here. So keeping your weight toward the toes without the clinging occurring, finding passive arms, heavy shoulders, and really suspending the spine, suspending the skull. So the crown is supported, but make sure you're not feeling like you're jamming your head into your props. If you are, reduce the height. Check out the heels. If they feel heavy again, shifting weight toward the toes. If the knees are bent, see what you can do to extend the legs. It might mean you need to raise the height under the head. Energetically lifting the inner arches of your feet as you roll the outer skirting of the feet down. As you draw the outer kneecaps in and rotate the inner knees back. Begin to lift your head. Place your hands in a way that you can carry weight into the hands and start to move the feet together. We're going to set up for Virasana, headstand, and using the wall for support. If you're not inverting today, you could work on the foundation of headstand with the feet down. And because that's more challenging than the full inversion, taking rests in child's pose once or twice, just to kind of break out the rigors of that modified pose. So if you're going to use the wall or freestanding in the middle of the room, you'll probably want to fold up your mat so that you have enough padding for your comfort. And I know, John, in the past, we have put a little blanket underneath the mat, just the part that's away from the wall, to help get your elbows down. So we haven't talked about that recently, but you could wedge blanket under maybe the first quarter of that mat to elevate, to help your elbows ground, to elevate that side of the mat. So if you're going into the full inversion,
If you happen to come out of the pose, stay in child's pose. Don't come back up because it's too jarring for the nervous system today to come back into the inversion. Good, Kathleen. And then try one with both feet down and just keeping your legs as extended as you can. We'll stay another minute, and if you need to rest, Kathleen, then feel free to take a child's pose. Keep using your own breath as a guide back to presence. If your mind is wandering, let's turn attention back to the breath. With each exhale, letting something go. We'll start to shift out of the pose and find your way into child's pose. And stay in your child's pose for at least a minute. Making sure the forehead is touching something, whether it's your hands or your mat directly. We're going to be setting up for Viparita Dandasana, which is one of the scenarios we're going to be using a second chair or stool or some surface of a similar height as your chair seat. So find your way out of child's pose. Open your mat back up if you folded it. And we're going to create our Viparita Dandasana setup, starting with one chair. And to the front side of the chair, you're going to create support for your head. And for this pose, it's the crown of the head that's supported. In a different pose, like shoulder stand, we support the back of the head. But in Viparita Dandasana, it's the crown of the head. So it could be a bolster, it could be a blanket and a bolster. You don't quite know yet, probably, so giving yourself ample support. I find it easier to reduce height than to try to build it up under me at the last moment. So kind of approximate your height generously. And then we'll be using that second surface
for the feet, which puts us in a milder sort of Viparita Dandasana. So I think everybody here today has the yoga chair, so hopefully you can climb through. And as you're setting up, I'll get myself into the pose and just kind of show you the general idea. Getting the crown of the head down. Mine is comfortable for now. I might need to reduce the height later. Extending my legs so that they can rest on that second platform. And then I might just start here with my hands high if I'm tight across the chest. And then eventually I'm going to thread my arms inside the chair legs to really broaden across the chest. And this is a pose that VKS Iyengar did every single day. So it's considered one of the essentials. And while it is a back bend, it can be very soothing and quieting to the nervous system, especially if we're doing it with all of this support. So I'm gonna take myself out of the pose and just come look at you guys to see how your setup is going. And when we do get ready to come out of the pose, I will guide us out in a way that is safe. Oh, that looks nice, Shoshana. John, that looks great, although I would love to see the top of your head grounded rather than the back. Lynn, that looks excellent. And Mindy, everybody looks really nice. So because Lynn and Mindy have the hands in the position, I'm going to be talking to you guys first. If you feel like eventually from there, Lynn and Mindy, you'd like a little more opening, you could turn the palms out away from those chair legs. Yes. And keep winding the inner arms out. Exactly. So you do have to continue the work of driving the tailbone into the body toward the ceiling to keep the lower back more neutralized. We'll be in this version another couple of minutes. This, of course, is bringing the breath higher up into the upper lobes of the lungs. And feeling the chest not only rising, but spreading with each inhale. So we're going to start to bring the arms out of the chair legs if you were within the chair legs, and grab up higher on the chair, and so that you can use your upper arms against the chair seat. You're going to bring your feet down first. And then using the arms leverage against the chair seat, keep your breastbone forward and bring yourself up. And you'll stay seated and just do some twists. Good, Kathleen. Do some twists from side to side at your own rhythm, whatever feels best. And while you're twisting, I'm just going to show you stage 2, which I've taken away that chair seat, the second one. So we come into the very same position. We start with the feet grounded. Get the head down, keeping the arms either kind of low on that bar of the chair, or again, you have the option to kind of go deeper and grab within the chair legs. And then we're going to extend the legs one by one, keeping our toes pulling toward us, our heels shooting away from us, and really more actively driving the tailbone into the body. And if this is too extreme, you can repeat the first version again. So of course you have to discern what is best for you. So now that you've seen it, I'm going to come up and watch again and see how you do there. The legs extend last. And Mindy, it looks like you might benefit from blocks under your heels. So you have to decide if a block under, each heel would be better for you. You're looking a little bit too bowed. And that goes for anybody. And I can't see your complete legs, John, but it looks a little bit like you're rotated out. So roll the inner thighs down. And kneecap should be looking up at the ceiling, not out to the sides, not cockeyed. And try to fully extend your legs. And again, that might require blocking the heels. Beautiful, Lynn. And Kathleen, of course, I can only see your upper body, but hopefully the legs are feeling okay to you. And see if you can pull the toes back toward you a little bit more, Mindy. There you go. And good. Shoshana, are you all right? Okay, thank you. The good old thumbs up, yes. Tummy. So just, again, guide yourself back to breath if the mind has distance from what you're doing. And we'll be here just another half a minute. Begin to bend your knees and unthread the arms out of the chair legs and grab on higher and kind of dig the upper arms into the chair. Use your feet and use your stomach muscles to bring yourself up with support for your back. And just again, pause there and do a few twists gently from side to side. Beautiful. So you have to wait out any dizziness, just stay seated. And once you feel that you've kind of cleared that dizziness, you're going to start to climb out of the chair. we're going to come into the pose that yesterday I did not want to come out of. It's a version of bound angle pose reclining, Supta Konasana, but we're going to use the bolster horizontally behind the chest. So if you don't have a bolster, you can always just roll up 2 blankets or 1 blanket. You could roll a mat inside of a blanket. And of course, you can bind your legs with a belt. It not only deepens the pose, but it gives a sense of security to the legs. Like you're all packaged up and held together in the pose. Sometimes I use it not for going to my deepest expression of the pose, but for really that feeling of being cradled or held, which is especially nice in a restorative practice. So if you are going to belt, you're just going to place a loop around your lower back and then slide a loop under the toes so that you see the strap, the belt, moving from the tops of your feet over the hip crease. And then tightening off any excess so that you're in your kind of your best possible version of your legs, that you don't feel any pain, but you feel a good amount of depth. And then of course, creating some support under the hips. If you're sensing your legs are holding themselves there, you're going to want to prop anywhere from the hips to the knees. So especially if you have that kind of floating knee look, put some sort of propping to close the gap. And we're going to try to have that bolster come under the back, the rib cage. And the head, as you can see, maybe I have a block for my head. So what I don't want to have is my chin kind of wagging high and my forehead dropped low. So I'm going to tip the block in a way that lowers my chin to my chest. And because we have this bolster running vertically, the arms kind of have nowhere to go. So raise your arms overhead, and you can just kind of bind your hands more loosely, or you could be a little bit more active and grab your elbows. It's really what you're preferring right now. And if you find this too extreme, you can do a couple things. You can scoot your butt away from the end of the bolster, the edge of the bolster. You could reduce the height of the support of the bolster and substitute a rolled blanket instead. Or if it's really too much, you can turn your bolster vertically. So we're going to hold this pose about 5 minutes. And as you hold the pose, I'm going to read to you, we've been talking about the yamas, which in yoga are the personal restraints. The yamas are the first of the 8 limbs of the yogic path. And the second yama that we're on is truthfulness, astaya. I'm sorry, satya. Astaya is later, that's not stealing. But satya is about living our truth. It is that simple. There are many ways to do this, as there are people who practice satya. And no one can tell you how you should listen for or find the truth within yourself. For some of us, it's a long road back to our own truth. For we live in a culture in which truth is a rare commodity. We are each possessed of an inner compass. When we stand still in the wilderness and take our bearings, we are able to apprehend the truth about ourselves and the world around us. And once we commence the practice of satya, we'll never want to look back. We have only our own suffering to lose. As Plato said, truth is the beginning of every good thing, both in heaven and on earth. And he who would be blessed and happy should be from the first a partaker of truth, for then he can be trusted. Over time, you'll have the pleasure of watching this beautiful practice blossom in your life in a way that is honest and authentic. As you learn to speak the truth, you will learn to be true to yourself, to all that is best in you. So I like this passage from Rolf Gates, one of my very favorite books, Meditations from the Mat, because oftentimes when we talk about satya, we talk about speaking the truth. But here, of course, he's also addressing tuning into our personal truths and living our truths. Just allow yourself to be in this pose for another minute, watching your breath as if from a distance. Noticing how the body continues to settle. Every exhale, we let go of some tension. It could be mental, it could be physical. The season of fall is about nature, letting go, returning to the earth, knowing when it's time to release, so that the cycle can continue. Now you're going to help your legs come out of the belt if you're using one. And when you're able to, join your knees and ease to one side. It's a little bit tricky on that bolster, but help yourself to one side. And we're going to set up for Supta Virasana, reclining hero pose. And feel free, Kathleen, to come into cross-legged reclining. And anybody else that's, I know Shoshana, you're still dealing with a knee injury, although it's healing. You could also take cross-legged reclining, if that's better for you. You are taking reclining hero pose, you can start to set that up for yourself. And sometimes, depending on how tight the legs are from day to day, it's best to incline the bolster setup so that that setup is closer to you. You don't have to recline as deeply. And that's usually the version I take. As a runner, I'm constantly trying to offset the tightness of the muscles in my legs. So if you're taking cross-legged position, you'll just want to, at kind of our halfway point, switch the crossing of your legs. And now, of course, we're working with the bolster running with the spine. So instead of against the spine like we just were. And begin to help yourself back. And when you get there, you might realize that you need to adjust and modify. Sometimes I run a little bit of a lumbar support across my lower back since I have extreme kind of hyperextension in my lumbar. So you might need to make those adjustments so that your pose is really sustainable. The hands can be positioned toward the feet initially, and then as ready, extending the arms, maybe fully extending the arms, maybe Grabbing onto your forearms. Keep the chin tilted toward the chest. Keep the tailbone working toward the front body, toward the ceiling. As you do so, try not to move the buttocks away from the floor. So you kind of have to orchestrate some dynamic action there. Take the tailbone in, but keep a sense of weight. Keep your buttocks grounded. Compact your rib cage in towards center line of your body and toward the back body. If you're in hero pose, attempt to roll the outer shins down to the floor. You might encourage that by rolling your small toes deeper into the floor. And anytime we're in a back bend, you might take on unnecessary tension in your face, especially around the temples. So descend the flesh of the temples. Keep your gaze pointed away from your brain, and also just think about the whole face releasing from the hairline toward the chin. And yes, if you haven't changed the crossing of your legs, now is a good time to do so if you're in the Sukhasana position. Keep bringing your attention back to breath. And with every exhale, a repeated invitation to release, to let go. Something you're carrying emotionally, physically, mentally. Letting go of the clutching, the gripping, the grasping. Start to lower the hands toward the feet. If you're in Sukhasana, you're going to be rolling to your side, so Kathleen Shoshana. And if you're in Supta Virasana, pressurize your hands, just like we came out of Viparita Dandasana. Really support the spine. Bring the spine toward the front body, bring the stomach muscles toward the spine. And those of you that took Supta Virasana, you may want to take a downward dog just to relieve your legs. Or Dandasana Mindi, like you're doing. Either way, get the legs really extended well. We're going to set up for Situ, Banda, Sarvangasana, which is kind of the shoulder stand, neck position, but milder. So Shoshana, it might be fine for you. And 2 blocks, a strap, and a blanket are kind of the essentials. So the blanket will be just for your head and shoulders. So you can unfold it wherever your head is going to be. And then we're going to have 2 blocks, one for the feet, one we'll place under the lower back. And those should be the same height, which you might not know what you need yet. So just kind of place them maybe at the middle height. And then we're going to belt the thighs together so that our heels can stay on the block without a lot of extra effort. So you'll take your loop, hopefully you still have from bound angle. And just kind of cinch your legs together. And from there, you'll start on your back with your feet grounded. Make sure your head and shoulders are on the same blanket height. And then lift your hips and just place the block under the sacrum, whatever height you're going to experiment with. Mine is the medium level. And of course, matching that height by stepping your heels onto the block that you've placed near your feet. And if you decide your block needs to be adjusted up or down, you can do that, but make sure both come into the same height. Now we want to kind of tuck the outer upper arms down to the floor and lift the shoulder blades toward the chest. Inviting the tailbone into the body and taking the palms in a face up position. Pressing your arms into the floor to help support the lift and spread of the chest. Attempting to keep your toes above your heels and your second toes in line with your heels. And I'm going to come out and just look at you. So of course there's effort, but then matching that with repose in the pose and finding the quieter side of the pose. Think about the inner thighs rolling down to the floor. And studying satya in our asana practice, how are we being true to ourselves in our practice? Are we doing the needful? Are we doing the non-harming, the first yama? Now begin to step your feet off of the block and then lift your hips and slide that block away. And once you've loosened the belt, you should be able to step your feet wide and let the knees touch. Place your hands on your belly. And just be with the after effects of that Situ Banda. Usually a residue of quietness, of serenity will follow. Just give yourself another minute. going to help yourself now roll to your side. We're going to be setting up for plow pose, shoulder stand, and plow pose. So this will be the second occasion where we're going to use that second surface. So that could be whatever you have, a stool, a chair. And I'm just going to kind of demonstrate as you're setting up where this is headed so you can make modifications if you need to, and I'll show you an alternate pose if this isn't going to work for you. But this is where we bring the shoulders down by getting the backs of the knees against the chair. And just like we did in Viparita Dandasana, threading the arms into the chair legs, if you can. Otherwise, keeping them outside is fine too. I'm going to step onto this bar here. And then I'm going to bring my feet over to the chair seat. This is plow pose. It's deeply quieting. It's modified because our feet are elevated. Classically, they're touching the floor. It's a lot deeper forward bend. We're starting here. And then we're going to go into chair-supported Sarvangasana, either with the legs extended, or you could have your legs resting on the back of the chair. And then we're going to come back to plow pose. And I'm doing this in fast forward, so of course we'll be going and holding these longer. But when it's time to come out, you'll bring your feet onto this part of the chair. And I will be talking you through this as we go. Then you can bring your arms out and you're going to help yourself lower your hips to the blankets. And you can rest here with your feet on the chair. If you want to, you can come back to Situ Banda with the 2 blocks if you prefer. Or you could take a full shoulder stand without the chairs. As you can see, if you're doing the chair version that I just showed you, I've put a mat down, my sticky mat on the chair seat. Gives you more traction to keep those hips stable on the chair seat, not sliding. And then I've set up 2 blankets that are folded in these kind of rectangular shapes, which gives me the right amount of height. You might need 3. You could use a bolster if you have a bolster. That's a good substitute. You could use a bolster and a blanket additionally on top of that bolster. And then whatever surface you're going to use here for plow pose. And then you'll kind of come onto the chair side saddle, swing the legs up, and scoot your butt toward the back of the chair. And now you can bring your arms down. This part's a little bit, well, it's all about keeping the chair stable. So just lower yourself down, grab the chair legs until the shoulders land. And then keeping yourself anchored to the edge of the chair. You can raise the legs one by one. You're grabbing onto the back legs of the chair with your hands. That gives you even more stability. Raise the legs one by one and find your way into plow pose. And once I'm in plow pose, I'm really not putting a lot of the weight of my body on the chair. Now for the next stage, which we're not going into yet, I'm going to come down to watch everybody, so please just stay where you've arrived to. And I'm going to talk you through the rest of it so that I can see you. Good. Now begin to raise the legs one by one. And you may decide to keep it there, or you may extend the legs and let the backs of the knees meet the back of the chair. There's ways to kind of explore the chair shoulder stand. So make sure the shoulders touch down. And John, if you want to, if it's not coming along, you could do your version where you're on your blankets set up without the chairs. But whatever version you're doing, keep lifting with your legs, including Shoshana in legs up the wall pose, just that kind of upward effort of the legs. The legs become the lightness and the upper body becomes kind of the grounded position. And you can play with the hands turning out, palms face out if you need a little bit more happening in the chest. We're going to begin to come back into plow pose. So start to take your feet back toward the chair seat. And for a supported plow pose, Salamba Halasana, you could extend the arms toward the chair and draw the chair seat to support the thighs. That part is optional. It's really what's more quieting. Yeah. Good. And now we're going to leave the pose altogether. So return to grabbing onto your chair. We're going to help the feet find the bar of the chair, the high bar. And then we're going to ease our hips down to the height that your shoulders are currently on. So that the head and shoulders come on to the same height. So with the feet on the bar of the chair, Kathleen, I can't see your feet, but make sure the feet on the other bar of the chair that your butt is on, the other chair. Yep, put the feet on the high bar. There you go. And then help your hips down by holding the chair. Good. Yep, sometimes that was great. So the hips stay elevated, the head and shoulders come down, and you can let your feet rest on the chair seat and your legs rest on the chair seat. The knees might want to open up wide. You might also want to take bound angle or crossed ankle position here. And as you're ready, you're going to help your legs down. We're going to come in, do Viparita Karani, so legs up the wall pose, and I'm encouraging everybody to use bolster. And I know it's tough to see here, but between the wall and the bolster, I have a block kind of spacing. It's a good amount of space for most of us to keep between the bolster and the wall. So I put a block there. So I have a block, bolster, my blanket. The easiest way, although it looks like it's not easy to come in, is to somersault in. So I'll demonstrate that. You put your head down and kind of roll into the pose. It's kind of a slick way to get as close to the wall as possible. Let me show that again. It's kind of like I'm coming into a headstand, but I'm going to tuck my chin into my chest and let my butt find the wall and slide. So if that's not your favorite option, you can try sitting sideways at the wall with your butt kind of pressing into the wall. Sweep the legs up as you help your trunk and arms down. This is more effort, but for some of us, the somersault is scary. It's not accessible. Some of us might have neck injuries that prevent somersaulting in. So however you can get in, you're going to go into that position. So Kathleen, it looks like your butt is higher than we want it. Yeah, let your butt rest, let your lower back rest. Beautiful. Good. And of course, I can't see what's under your back, but hopefully you're supported. Okay. So this is the last pose we're going to do before Pranayama and Shavasana. And we're already starting to enter kind of the pratyahara state of the senses withdrawing from the outer world. You're looking away from your brain. Not taking as much sensory input in. You might start to notice there's a sense of stillness coming in the mind. To set up for pranayama, you're going to transition as easily as you can by bending your knees and helping yourself to either side. And we're going to set up 2 blankets in a trifold. So from the rectangular open blanket, you're going to kind of make a letter Z shape. And you're going to do that twice. And stack those 2 blankets, but stagger them. So that the first blanket is going to be closer to your body than the top blanket. And once you lie down, you'll be able to adjust the height of the head to fit your needs so that your chin and chest come together. So pranayama, it's always a good idea to give yourself a blanket if you feel like you're cold, to cover your eyes if you strain to keep your eyes shut, because we're trying to just keep the body quiet. You're going to come down to the blanket setup so that the top blanket is supporting behind the rib cage, but we don't really want it any lower. You want your butt directly on the ground. And that first tier of blanket is just what you're using for lumbar support. So butt is flat, first tier of blanket lumbar, the bulk of the blanket under the thoracic. And then of course you're going to take the head portion and just raise the height, kind of, I call it a snail. You kind of just roll it to tilt the chin toward the chest. And let your feet open up just a little wider than your hips and bring complete passivity to the legs. Just let the feet flop out, big toes towards small toes. Open your arms in a way that your armpits can aerate, your chest can spread. You're on the backs of your hands. And we always start the pranayama practices from Ujjayi 1, which is just really acknowledging your baseline breathing. As objectively as you can, it's very much a challenge, at least it always was for me, not to make slight changes to my breath as I observed it. So really just allowing the breath to flow exactly as it is. You might notice the movement in the body, kind of like you're a researcher taking notes on your breath as objectively as you can. The pace of the breathing. The quality of the breathing. Is it soothing? Is it somewhat of an anxious breathing style? Is there any sound associated with the breath? Is there any temperature associated with the breath? We're going to be coming into Viloma practice, interrupted inhalation today. And before we get going, just a quick kind of overview. You can interrupt the inhale as many times as your breath allows, for 2 to 3 second pauses until the lungs are full. And part of the delicate act of Viloma is we want to immobilize the diaphragm in those pauses. And as you continue from the pause into continuing to inhale, try not to loosen the diaphragm. So it's very much of a control in the diaphragm, but also without a hardening. A lot of our pranayama practices are very subtle, delicate practices. So let's try a round together. We'll do a full inhale, exhale. From the bottom of that exhale, beginning Viloma with the 2 to 3 second pauses. Breathing in, pause. Breathing in, pause. And at the top of the breath, Ujjayi exhalation out. So a smooth, long, continuous out breath. Normal cycle in and out. Easy breathing. You might need to do that twice or more times before trying another Viloma inhale. As you're ready, make sure you're starting from a deep exhalation. Immobilizing the diaphragm, and as you keep breathing in, keeping the diaphragm somewhat immobilized, not completely loosening it, but keep the abdomen soft. Long exhalation out, Ujjayi exhale. Normal cycle of breathing in and out, maybe more than one. And as you're ready, you'll do 1 or 2 more cycles at your own cueing. You can think about this breathing, if you need an image, like climbing a ladder, a very long ladder. When you finish your next round of Viloma inhale, return to easy cycling breath that is automatic, breath you don't control. Ujjayi 1. And then as quietly as you can, transition off the pranayama supports so that your lungs can go back to normal expansion. And maybe keeping some support for your head. We'll finish the last couple of minutes in Shavasana. Maybe covering up, maybe placing an eye pillow over your eyes. So the 8-limbed path of yoga starts with the moral code, the yama, the niyama, the restraints, the observances. And then we move to asana, pranayama, and now we come into pratyahara, which is the sense withdrawal. The mind becomes more focused, meditative, reflective, and eventually we come into samadhi, that 8th limb, where we feel a unification, a wholeness, a oneness. We lose a sense of separateness that keeps us in a suffering state. We feel connected within and to the larger whole. Giving yourself this time to just be. Nothing more is needed. We are going to start to bring ourselves out of Shavasana with just a little bit of a deeper breath flow and some gentle movement. Folding your hands onto your chest or belly, bending your legs and letting the soles of the feet slide onto the floor. And then easing yourself to one side. Just give yourself a few moments there before coming up. And once you're up to a seated position, sit up tall. Let your hands meet in front of your heart. And with the eyes closed and the gaze lowered, lift your heart toward your head and look toward the heart. And just take a moment to sense, to acknowledge the effects of your practice today. How this practice does help us align with our own personal truths. Let's take a deep breath in through the nose and let it go. From the place within me that I know to be divine, I honor that place within each of you. Namaste. Great. Thank you all for joining me today. And I'll see you soon, hopefully. Take care.